Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our next panel. And our first speaker will be Susanna HERTRICH, who is an internationally exhibited artist whose work exists at the intersection of art and technoscience. Her multidisciplinary practice examines our relationship with technology in a world where artificial, technological, and natural biological ecosystems are increasingly intertwined.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. So when I actually read the open call for the conference, it really resonated with me because I have a body of work that's looking into dealing with the senses, augmenting human senses, sometimes modeled after sensorial abilities found in animals as artistic research. But time is short, so I'm only going to show two of those projects. So just a quick overview. I'm an artist working in my studio in Berlin at the moment without affiliation, but I've had the pleasure to collaborate with a couple of research labs internationally, mostly as an artist in residence, sometimes as a research fellow, and most recently in Switzerland, I was conducting a long-term artistic research project together with a media scientist, which I talk about a little bit later. And I had a couple of teaching positions as well, also most recently in Switzerland. So one aspect that has been driving my work actually since my graduation from the Royal College of Art in London in 2008 is the idea of augmenting the human senses. And one thing that inspired me at the time was a book by a British philosopher called John Gray, who is convinced that humans, we are just animals after all. But I think that other than our animal companions, we are not perfectly adapted to the environments that we live in. We are this kind of strange animal that we aim to shape our environment so that it adapts to us, which has been a success story so far. But as we all know, most recently, we have overdone this to an extent and increasingly struggle to deal with our shaped nature. Another thing I found quite interesting was the sort of perspective on technology as organs or as found, for example, in cybernetic thinking. This is a quote from a German cyberneticist, Karl Steinbuch. And what I find quite interesting is that he not only writes about all the, let's say, toxic environmental aspects that we are unable to sense, but also kind of links the idea of technology to that of an organ as something that is inside or on the body. If I was asked sort of to give a statement about my research, I think what's important to understand is the ABC. So I do have a practical approach. I consider findings that are important for my project, whether from biology or haptics research or psychology and so on, to create scenarios that are at least theoretically feasible. I'm more interested in the poetic qualities of the project rather than, let's say, typical computer science prototypes that just function. And after all, there's a degree of wild speculation. So which means that the images and objects that derive from my research have to be understood as vessels to carry a narration about the cultural imaginaries in which these sort of anticipated technologies have become reality. So I don't create blueprints for new tech, but they are rather a means of storytelling and critique. So the first project I'm going to show is by now actually 10 years old. It plays with the idea of a fast-forwarded human evolution based on an artificial sense to help cope with extreme environments. It was conceived for an artist residency in Beijing, where I had the chance to experience the intense mod myself. It's called Jacobson's Fabulous Olfactometer, and I will just basically show a video without much comment. So for me, it was important if I create a prosthesis like that, it's not a typical sci-fi, white, glossy, very futuristic looking piece, but something that is a very sort of real existing prosthesis. And some people have approached me and said this is a rather steampunky design, but actually it isn't. I was at the time working with a student of product design who was trained as a prosthesis builder, and he said that's exactly how he was trained to make prosthesis. So they still look like that in the most cases. And so again, what I said, the poetic quality of the work is important. So the materiality of this work was very important to me. And I had those gears on the side cut from camel bone, which again is a reference to an ancient human dream of obtaining animal abilities by, for example, using animal parts on the body, like, for example, animal teeth, or kind of mimicking the whiskers of a jaguar, having the strength of a jaguar. And the term fabulous in the work refers to the current scientific debate on whether humans show rudiments of a vomeronasal organ or not. And the debate is apparently still ongoing. And what I read is that in the embryonic development, there is a stage where we have rudiments of the organ, but then as the embryo develops further, they do disappear. Other scientists claim that 26.3% of all Bulgarians should have rudiments of the vomeronasal organ. So if you're Bulgarian, maybe you have it. So the other project, Sensorium of Animals, is a longer-term project. It ran for 3.5 years, funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation as a collaborative artistic research project. And it started with the sensory ecology of a small fish, which stood at the beginning of this long-term process to explore invisible technological infrastructures, and the project speculates about possible future worlds through objects, installations, video, and writing. On the photo, you can see the team conducting the research. So it's basically me and my colleague, a media scientist, Shintaro Miyazaki, and we were based at the Critical Media Lab at the Academy of Art and Design in Basel. So this is the fish I'm talking about. So we were inspired by the sensory ecology and biology of the Peters elephant nose fish. This is a species that is capable of electrolocation and reception, sensory abilities which allow these fish to sense their electromagnetic environment. Well, a lot of fish can actually sense electromagnetic environments, but in particular, these fish create their own electromagnetic fields around their bodies. And rather than seeing the world in murky waters where they live with their eyes, they can feel the environment on their skin. So we intertwined the non-human sensorium of the fish with the seemingly immaterial worlds of signal-based information technologies. Here's just a snippet of the electromagnetic spectrum in Europe that constitutes the domain of our modern digital information infrastructures, which remain invisible to us. However, our chosen area of inquiry within this research didn't start or end with the technological circumstances. Rather, we were interested in an idea of an electromagnetic Umwelt after HERTRICH, and the question of what it means if we obtain animal abilities, and the notion of a technological magic for the wireless infrastructures that are increasingly difficult for us to understand. And during these 3.5 years, we conceptualized different artistic and designerly ways, aesthetic approaches, built concrete artifacts, and created film scenarios. And on a speculative level, we wanted to ask what kind of society would unfold if we were able to sense our electromagnetic infrastructures. And we followed a threefold approach that allowed us to work with an enriched spectrum of theoretical propositions, narrations, and speculations, which I will explain briefly. So the historical contextualization with a particular focus on the field of sensory substitution was one part of our inquiry, prominent in post-World War II computer science labs, for example, the Cutaneous Communication Lab at Princeton University, which first discovered several somatosensory, like skin-based bodily illusions in the 60s and 70s. Also the work by Paul Bakke-Irita on sensory substitution for the blind. For example, he and his team were trying to provide blind people with a new sense of seeing by feeling, by letting them feel images on their skin, similar to, I think, how our fish sees the world. And to work with that, we also embarked in what we call a media experimentation. So, for example, we reenacted one of the circuits by modern means that Paul Bakker-Irita did, and we invited, for example, people to work with us here. So for this prototype, we invited Akitoshi Honda from Berlin to work with us on the system. And the detection of electromagnetic waves was based on the detector circuit that Shintaro Miyazaki developed together with Martin Haus, which some of you might know. The fictional world design was also quite an important part of the project, a storytelling approach where we ask a lot of what if questions. So in this strand of investigation, we engaged with the techno-magic, animism, and radio myth. These contexts built a broad spectrum of bizarre narrative, imaginative concepts, and alternative metaphors. And they allowed us to create linkages between the world of animals, electromagnetic media technology, and human-based understanding. So we, for example, collected curious items, designed fictional prototypes, and made short films. So the one below is interesting. That's a lucky charm to protect your IT hardware from Akihabara Shrine in Japan. And also we found that the electromagnetism's obscure, esoteric, or magical properties are potent to engage an audience as they offer a gateway to immerse into a narration. So I see them as tools that mediate between the visible world and the invisible ether world. Because usually if you talk to people about electromagnetism, they don't really care as long as their phone is connected. Right? So you have to find some kind of angle to draw people into your story, and this is helpful. And also out of the fictional world designing, I created a set of objects that I'd like to refer to as fictional prototypes. They kind of blend in the language of antennas with, for example, a dowsing rod or a lucky charm. So we regard them as boundary objects that help to make tangible the visible world of electromagnetic signals and the stories that connect to these. And concretely, these objects were also used in the short films that we created. So, for example, we made one film set in 2038 where a shaman, you see on the picture, who is able to sense electromagnetic fields, performs a ritual to purge a room. And there's another film that is set in the past in 2008. We have a group of people trying to connect to Wi-Fi by self-made Wi-Fi objects that some of you might remember. And what was interesting for me, so this was the first time to actually work in a lab that's much more positioned in the humanities area than in computer science. So although it looks like a place where a lot of stuff is made, actually the majority of the work is through writing and publishing. So I struggled a little bit of being in this lab as a practitioner. And also we found that our research process was almost invisible as well. So we were sharing documents, we had whatever, a Google Drive platform and other things where we would collect papers and ideas, but nothing really was there to be tangible. So we decided to create this room for ourselves in the research lab where we could actually assemble all the things that were important for our work, like the prototypes, tools, ideas as the chalk drawing on the wall that I really needed to find out what this project is for me and what is my role in this project, the books that we read and so on. And it grew into a kind of a stage or a space, and we called it a research aquarium in which we like swim in our ideas, so to speak. And it really, we really did it for us, but it absolutely hit a nerve, and it was shown in various exhibitions in the end. This was at the Triennale in Milano, where we showed it as a kind of diorama where you peek into a researcher who has just left the room. There are other I'm almost done. Other instances as well, and we were lucky, like last year, to be nominated for the Swiss Design Awards category research, and we showed an enactment of the project at Messe Basel. And also the project is sort of the funding went to 2019, 21, we published an open source publication, 22 a printed book, but still for this exhibition in like last year, we made a sound installation that you can listen to when you pick up the receiver of the phone. So it's kind of still an ongoing project. And also I would like, now it's gone back. Before I end, I invite everybody to download our book. So as I said, it's an open source publication. It's completely free. You get a quite nice idea of the project, I think, and it's not your typical scientific publication. It does have a scientific text, but it also has a science fiction story. It has a very epic poem and a lot of images. So I think then I'm done.
Hey there, thank you for your presentation, very lovely. And speaking about the elephant nosefish and the sensing and you mentioned that there were like people with eyesight problems, and in one of the pictures, I think I saw micromotors, which probably vibrate. Yes, and I was wondering, like, have you delved in any research regarding this?
So what we did with the micromotors, for example, we were trying to recreate the cutaneous rabbit illusion, which they found in the Princeton lab. And that's it's a quite interesting thing, because you, at the time, I think they used solenoids. I'm not 100% sure, but you position a haptic source on your arm and you vibrate it in a certain pattern, and you're supposed to feel a set of illusions. And what we managed to recreate was a sliding finger on the arm. So like you have 3 spots that are stimulated, but it feels like somebody sliding your finger. And using that method, you could actually write letters on somebody's back. So that's the theory. You should also be able to recreate the sensation of a little animal, like a rabbit, jumping up your arm. We never managed to create that. I've also tried this years ago in Japan when I was in that lab, because I was really curious in this imaginative rabbit. I never managed the rabbit, but we managed the finger. So, and I think this is pretty much what Paul Bucky-Rita's research is based on. It's like writing these patterns on your back based on these, or using these illusions that we connect dots that are not actually connected, but yeah, it feels to us like as if they were connected. Yeah.
Then I will wish you a lot of luck with your future research. I think your research is very interesting, and I really enjoyed the lip modification. I wanted to ask you, what has been the audience response from using this device?
Well, I don't let people use it, but the work I do is too fragile. That's what I mean. So it's really about the poetic qualities, the materiality, how it looks like. It's not something that I can pass around and have people use it. But the comments are mixed. I mean, if I show it, let's say, in design contexts, people believe in the technologies, like, why would I wear it? You know, this is not a solution. Yeah, of course it's not a solution, but I think it's it's like a prototype for a product, so to speak. If I show it in art context, of course it's read differently. Yeah, I got this one feedback that it looks so old-fashioned. The prosthesis is old-fashioned, it's steampunk, but no, it's actually, it's a classical prosthesis, but it's not steampunk. Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's mixed, but I think most people get it, that it's not meant to be a blueprint for the next tech, right?
Thank you so much. Our next presentation is online. So Oksana CHEPELYK is an APF fellow at AMU, leading researcher, New Technologies Department, Modern Art Research Institute of Ukraine, and the author of book, The Interaction of Architectural Spaces, Contemporary Art and New Technologies. She's also a curator of International Festival of Social Sculpture. Oksana has studied art in Kiev, followed a PhD in Amsterdam University. And she has received many awards and had a variety of so many exhibitions.
Collaboration with Madatak and its founder Yuri Lech had fruitful result, presented at the project TERRA-OCEAN, Water Come Into My Soul, with the audiovisual installations on the Age Ecoseed Within Scientifica No. 2 in collaboration with IMBO and MIO of the Aix-Marseille University. This edition, Madatak Biennale, with the theme Ars Hybrida, Bellum Ars Eco Hybrid Art About War, offers delivered a session of Videodome site-specific works on largest Videodome Video Sky LED screen in Europe, 300 square meters. My two immersive environments used as a research tool, the media installation Liquid Modernity, Liquid Ethics, of the flow of compressed urban and natural space refers to Zygmunt Bauman Liquid Modernity as a new reality of 21st century after participation as a guest of honor with immersive environment of the Garden of Divine Sons after Grigori Skovoroda at the Festival of Ni. The project was invited to be shown within MADATAC. It works with the modern context because the National Memorial Museum of the philosopher was destroyed by a Russian missile strike. It is also important to understand that Russians did not accidentally destroy the museum of Grigori Skovoroda, but because the philosopher created the basis for the Ukrainian worldview paradigm. He was also a poet, teacher, and composer of liturgical music. His significant influence on his contemporaries and following generations and his way of life were universally regarded as Socratic. The philosopher was an example how to manage to be a free man in the era of absolutism in the 18th century, not to serve the authorities. In this way, he was also a model of behavior. The project Garden of Divine Sons is an immersive digital environment with transparent spatial structures that serve as screen for moving images that reflects the philosophical doctrine of Grigori Skovoroda, his rationalism, hermeneutics, mysticism, sensuality, philosophy of the heart, philosophy of the joy of knowledge. The project at IMERA is developed with the focus on underwater biodiversity, but also on pro-life advocacy as a whole. The creative process prompted me to consider the symbiotic future and ethics of the partnership with nature. Genesis project is an immersive environment. Since February 24, 2022, the collection of every museum in Ukraine has been evacuated for safety and protection due to the full-scale Russian invasion, including the Corsak's Museum of Contemporary Art. On March 9, 2024, the Corsak's Museum of Contemporary Ukrainian Art opened up the updated main exhibition, supplemented by a newly created section of digital art. The Genesis project was opened with the My Immersive Environment Metaphysical Time Space 24, developed during a research residency at IMERA Aix-Marseille University. The opening of the updated collection of the contemporary Ukrainian art became a landmark for Ukraine and is a symbol of cultural resistance to the aggressor. The exhibition became an ocean inaugurated in the framework of Global Med 2024, dedicated to the theme Heritage in the Mediterranean global issue, explores marine biodiversity as a common natural heritage. In the context of Anthropocene, the ocean is increasingly understood in the term of the biodiversity, its unique ecosystem, and its role as a global climate regulator. The spatial symbiotic jellyfish installation is built as a reference to the hybrid Noah Ark and the Tower of Babel, when the builders freely communicated etiology of cultural differences, considering Babylon as the cradle of civilization with the possibility of mutual relations and understanding. The new Noah Ark is a collection of images of various representatives of plankton and marine sponges. 800 species live in the Mediterranean Sea. Murmuration is a phenomenon of coordinated fly movement, the creation of dynamic three-dimensional figure of variable density. The installation Murmuration explores the phenomenon of distributed mind and non-hierarchical interaction. Computer modeling helps to understand how an individual's behavior algorithm leads to this phenomenon. It has been shown that remuneration mechanism plays a protective role against predators. Inspired by the Blue Humanities project focuses on biological systems, techno-ecological sensorium that questions socio-ecological justice. In relation to the turbulence of the late Anthropocene, climate changes and resource wars, the scientists are working on the development of database to archive information about the different type of underwater species. At the MIO, Mediterranean Institute of Oceanography focuses on plankton, describing the dynamic of its existence under conditions of climate changes. At the IMBE, Molecular Diversity and Functioning of Ecosystems, led by Thierry Perez, focuses on sponges and their metabolomic data in order to create a metabolomic profile of the Mediterranean Sea. As a researcher, I joined this work with my artistic vision and task, asking how can art and technology reveal hidden players. This unification of metabolomics data inspired me with the idea of creating sound with a non-human agency in order to shift anthropocentric optics. The video raises awareness of how climate change and heat waves has transformed a rich marine ecosystem in August 2022. Scientists were surprised by the mortality of underwater species, namely gorgonians and Spongia officinalis, and the fragility of life and ecosystem due to rising sea surface temperature, which reached 5 degrees above average in August 2022, as opposed to the predicted 2 degrees. Due to climate change, invasive species migrate and displace autochthonous species, destabilizing local ecosystem. Project is about the vulnerability of biodiversity and the fragility of life. Global climate depends on our understanding of the functioning of plankton as the biological carbon pump. Phytoplankton, whose survival is threatened by climate change and rising ocean temperature, warming and occurring to the greater extent than on land and faster than scientists has predicted, providing an important ecological function for all aquatic life. If solar radiation is too high, phytoplankton can fall victim of photodegradation. The effect of the anthropogenic warming and ocean acidification on global phytoplankton populations is an area of active research, as plankton mortality, which causes changes in the zooplankton grazing rates, can be significant. Phytoplankton obtain energy through the process of photosynthesis and therefore must live in the well-lit surface layer of an ocean, sea, lake or other body of water. Phytoplankton account for about 50-70% of the photosynthetic activity on Earth. During photosynthesis, they assimilate carbon dioxide and release oxygen. The fixation of their accumulated energy is the form of carbon compounds in the basis of the vast majority of oceanic and many freshwater food webs, providing an important ecological function for all aquatic life. Changes in the vertical stratification of the water column, the rate of the temperature-dependent biological reactions, and atmospheric supply of nutrients are expected to have important effect on future phytoplankton productivity. One of the main food chain in the ocean, characterized by a small number of links, is that of the phytoplankton sustaining krill, which which in turn sustained the existence of baleen whales. The project is an invitation to humanity to the responsible adulthood in search of symbiotic future. The video ecosystem showed the humanitarian and environmental tragedy caused by the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam in Ukraine by the Russian Federation on June 6, 2023. It was hoped that this destruction, which became the largest man-made disaster in Europe, would be a turning point. The fresh water stored in the Kakhovka reservoir could have satisfied the drinking water needs of the entire planet for 3 years. The terrorist attack on Kakhovka hydropower plant caused an unprecedented loss of living organisms in the flooded zone and in the marine water area, polluted and desalinated. There was a massive destruction of flora and fauna, poisoning of soil and water resources, and all the losses occurred at the height of the breeding season, when most of the animals already had offspring. So for many of them, an entire generation died, as was proved at the scientific conference Nature Under Occupation: 10 Years of Russian Military Aggression Against the Environment. Bruno Latour stressed that the war in Ukraine, which coincided with the environmental crisis, created a new environmental regime. Art as a platform for prospecting in the blue humanities and the construction of the civilization of the future, and I feel like a drop in the ocean that can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Because of my recovery didn't go as planned, I had trouble building a presentation, so the RIXC request for video helped a bit because I had a visual report about the exhibitions of the last period for Artist Protection Fund, USA, and IMERA, so I added a description. Sorry, there is a lack of technical details. And the last presentation with this circular structure, it's a recording from the software projected in the planetarium. So the visitor actually inside of this space. It is not a flat video. It's immersive environment, and you can imagine this microscopic life and the ecosystem, and you are inside of those events.
Thank you for the explanation, because that really was my question, how this was exhibited, but now we understand better. Maybe you have a comment about your own works, because I think we saw so many works that you've created in the past couple of years. Maybe there's something that you want to say about them yourself.
I would like to add probably this metabolomics sonification idea, because metabolomics, it's data responsible for the heritage, so genetic information and influence of the environment and climate changes. And with sonification of this data, I try also to reflect those changes in the underwater species, and it's about actually the adaptability of these species. But a lot of them could die because of the temperature high. And so that's why I'm building this type of archive as a non-arc to keep at least this information of the existence of those species. And also there are like a couple of layers because to move this jellyfish, we try to work with the telescope, underwater telescope in Toulon, which is actually capturing neutrino, but also recorded the audio an influence of the noise to the life of the underwater species, which is like damaging their life as well. And also, according those audio to move this installation, but what we discovered, the difficulty to get a stream of this audio, because also Russian submarines, they are like traversing Mediterranean Sea and controlling not only Baltic but Mediterranean Sea as well. And military are listening this because it's very really complicated beside the echolocation to detect these military weapons of Russia.
Thank you for your presentations and really excellent work. And I really enjoyed both the visual and the poetic sides of your works. So thank you for taking part with your presentation. Our next speaker is in person. So Jan SHAO is a terrestrial artist and creative technologist living in New York. Jan's imaginative new media works explore the uncharted territories of perception, mediating the complex interrelations between humans and the earth. Jan's artistic language draws inspiration from geopoetics, the transitory essence of nature, and the ecological humanity. Currently, Jan is an artist fellow at the Gallatin Vet Lab at New York University. She is a recipient of Judson Morrissey Excellence in New York Media Award and this Initiative of Creative Research Fellowship.
I'm glad to be here and present my research and projects notes on oxygen and cyanobacteria. Now, hold your breath with me for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. In the morning, a little beam permeates through the curtain. I wake up, open my eyes, greeted by the familiar sight of the white ceiling. Then the soft sunlight, casting shadows of tree branches and leaves that swing in the morning breeze. I get up, make my way to the window, roll the window open, a rush of fresh air floods in. I take a deep breath, what fresh air. My senses start awakening in this morning. These movements and sensations unfold automatically by my physical body, responding to starting a day without thinking. Yet I find myself asking, what is this freshness in the air? Throughout the night, my room stood as a fortress of comfort, enclosed by solid concrete walls and sealed windows. While it kept me warm, it also trapped the carbon dioxide produced by my body's ceaseless metabolism. The simple act of opening the window reconnects the indoor shelter with the outdoor world. The air circulates. It rebalances the oxygen level in my room with Earth's atmosphere. Approximate 30 trillion cells eagerly absorb the oxygen influx and remove the waste, invigorates this human body. Humans, like all other living beings on Earth, rely on oxygen as a foundation of the metabolic process to sustain life, produce energy, and move through space. Oxygen, this essential element, is produced by a huge amount of photosynthetic organisms, primarily carried out by plants, algae, and the most ancient species, Cyanobacteria. From ocean to land, these photosynthesizers incessantly extract oxygen into the atmosphere and recycle carbon dioxide from the metabolism of most animals and plants. However, nowadays, oxygen is one of the most abundant substances in the atmosphere. Earth was not always like this way. It all began with Great Oxidation event, occurred around 2.4 billion years ago. This event, referred to Lynn Margulis and Dorgan Sagan as the oxygen holocaust in their book, Microcosmos. Cyanobacteria, through photosynthesis, begin to proliferate. They utilize sunlight as free unlimited power, driving their growth. Gradually fill the atmosphere with oxygen, poisoning other anaerobic bacteria, the Earth into a fertile land. After 300 million years of work, the atmosphere reached a composition close to what we have today, containing nearly 1/5 oxygen, supporting the rising of aerobic life and ultimately the evolution of multicellularity. According to endosymbiosis theory, Cyanobacteria as the earliest ancestor containing chloroplast, the green pigment that absorbs sunlight energy who entered into other bacterial cells, eventually evolved to algae and plants. The ability of photosynthesis is fast and efficient, which is why it has become a widespread symbiote to many other species. Today, it is common to find direct symbiotic relationship between cyanobacteria or simple algae with other organisms. Examples include the universal species lichen, the water fern Azolla, a kind of hydropoly green hydra, and the breathtaking salamander X, all evidence of this enduring partnership forged between photosynthesizers and other life forms. When we look into geological time, there are deep connection between geology and biology. Putting aside the modernity for a second, the existence of humans sits at the end of long tail of life evolution, a small dot woven in an intricate web of biology, the formation from numerous minerals and molecules. It is not a coincidence that we need to inhale oxygen, but in a broader sense, we live and survive together. We're symbiosis with these photosynthetic species. Yet we have such deep relationship with ancient life like cyanobacteria, physically and emotionally rely on our photosynthetic allies. However, around 3 centuries ago, this alliance started to fissure. When we look at the plants, they are no longer the subjects that will look back at us, but the observed, the object that can be manipulated by humans. Since industrial evolution, the development of human civilization has been built upon burning fossil fuel, unearth these organic treasures into human economy. The heritage of carbon content fixed by ancient photosynthetic life has been exploited to fuel the exploitation of human economic growth. Coal, oil, natural gas, these reserved and surplus energy stored in the layers of sedimentary rocks called as black gold, burning in seconds to produce the energy that eventually converts to money. While these non-renewable resources are consumed, humans now need a new kind of solar economy, accelerated cycle of matter and energy without geological delay. Biofuel, labeled as a renewable resource, has been greeted with great expectation. In the economies of biofuel, these photosynthesizers are considered as free in cost. Only humans need to be paid for the work. The term sustainability works for human economies, aiming for better human development in this world, but its essence that lie in the exploitation of the photosynthetic life into money does not change. The techniques invented for long-last production still embedded the slow violence enacted upon biological sources. In the mechanism of today's economy, it is hard to think about a kinship that is not existed in the capitalist system. Ecology. Ecological awareness emerged in the 18th century, melting the boundary between humanity and nature. The concern about ecology is something that penetrates our bodies, feelings, and minds amidst the rapid progression of disciplines including chemistry, biology, and geology. In the mid-19th century, the biologist Ernest Haeckel defined the ecology as an investigation of the total relation of organisms to their environment. A few decades later, in the 1920s, the geochemist Vernadsky introduced the concept of biosphere, which portrays living matter instead of life as a totality of living organisms. In the late 20th century, scientists James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis co-developed the concept of Gaia, describing the space of Earth's surface as a self-regulating biosphere, a homeostasis living entity involving the atmosphere, water, and soil. The gradual change theory have shifted us towards a more holistic perspective on the planet we live on. In this real world, living matters are alive based on spontaneous incorporating symbiosis instead of exploitation to thrive. How can we unlearn our fossilized thoughts and re-encounter a world with a Gaian perspective? Besides the biofield, in my research on cyanobacteria, the most clickable image online are about cyanobacteria bloom, often referred as harmful algae bloom. These green patches spreading across water bodies are frequently portrayed as environmental hazards, usually accompanied with distressing image of dead fish. Such a narrative is prevailing when people encounter with bacteria or some unknown part of the nature. Yet the cause of algae bloom are often linked to the water eutrophication. Under favorable conditions, cyanobacteria are able to double their population in a single day. A structure on its way to becoming living must reproduce itself. This is the distinctive character between life and non-life. Autopoiesis is a spirit that representing the essence of life, the inherent facility of organism, the dynamics of Gaia. In response to the still interpretation of cyanobacteria, I create a video installation, Autopoiesis, explore the beauty of the ability of self-reproduction. Is there a sound? Okay, yeah. The whole video lasts 5 minutes, and here's a short clip. Here is the installation. The sound is another sound piece in the group expression you hear. By using computational algorithms, I simulate the bloom phenomenon, accompanied with a sound that emphasizes their exponential growth. The visual work is projected on the water surface, creating a glowing illusion that blurs the line between computational simulation and the biological reality. Now imagine yourself jumping to the ocean with me. The sun broke through the clouds. The beam of light permeates into water. All of a sudden, we hear painting all around us. Small bubbles ascended upward, broke just beneath the surface. These bubbles filled every inch of the space. Oxygen-containing bubbles, the photosynthesis, the visible and invisible creatures all swimming with us. We hear the waves hitting our eardrums, somewhat swelling slowly, like have a low-pass filter and long reverbs. The sway of coral reefs, us floating, the massive amount of pinging, the photosynthesis, swelling, echoing, all that mixed together make our minds wandering. If we think from an animal perspective, our ears are not built to hear these photosynthetic species in the water. Yet before plants boarded on the land, the ocean was their world, and it still is, the algae's world, the cyanobacteria's world. And here's algae chorus, a listening experience. Using technology, I designed implicit interaction that build a feeling of communication. They're alive in ordinary vases and bottles that we are using every day. They're alive locally, at the same time in the rivers, in the lakes, in the oceans all over the world. And here's a short video. In this installation, there are 3 algae species: Cyanobacteria, Nanochloropus, and Chlorella vulgaris. Each thrive in different salt and alkaline conditions, forming the beautiful varied shades of the green. It poses question of how richness the green we can perceive, how many green shades we can name, how we relate to these familiar and strange green hues and tints. The sounds in this project, designed to reflect a deep connection to algae, activated when the light sensors detect movements. A carbon dioxide sensor subtly registers the change, responding to the increasing carbon dioxide level during your presence. The whole system is running on a Raspberry Pi. As you walk around them, feel them, and breathe with them, they sing back, form a chorus of life. Through a rich visual and listening experience, algae chorus invite us to render our sensibility to connect with algae, the photosynthesizers, the oxygen producers. In the context of climate change, it also reminds us the continuous circulation of oxygen and carbon dioxide and the roles in shaping life on Earth. It also raises a reflection on our anthropocentric habits and the hierarchy structure we imposed on biological life. In this shared space, the line between us and them begin to blur, encouraging us to question where we truly live and who we interdependent with. Here's the exhibition photos. Thank you.
I wanted to ask if you could present your video work in any way possible. How would you like to exhibit it?
Do you mean the first work?
Yep.
Yeah, I first think like I want large projection, but when I try the projection in the water, I think I really like the effect. It's like a double layered. Big. I don't want like the sound. Yeah, so I think it's really glowing, and I think it's a proper like a projection. If possible, I would like to make this box larger because of limit of funding.
Well, I think it would be very nice to project it on an actual lake or pond.
Oh yeah, I do try to project in my bathtub at my home because my projector can only lit up that. Yeah, it's very ambitious if projecting the lake.
You need a bigger projector.
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation. And I'm just curious about kind of a technical detail, but about your thought process as well when developing the second piece, the choir. Like how or what kind of qualities did you want to create with the sound? Like, was it quantized, or I don't know what kind of software do you use? But basically, what I'm trying to ask is, how did you come up with the sounds that you wanted to use for like to sonify the action of the algae?
I work with a sound designer. I think if we need to talk, it's not very scientific. It's more based on the feeling and imaginations. Like I'm keep talking, like imagine like you're just diving the ocean and the lakes, and it's kind of has a, you just can't hear it very clearly. It's because of water pressure of the air, but and also you need to feel there is something alive. They're floating up and down, and they are like fluctuation with the waves at the same time. They are kind of alive, and we also like listen a lot other artists sound pieces, how they kind of it's kind of very poetic approach, how they approach to has the feeling that you sounds they are in the water.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We are gonna go to our next presenter online. Jozef, Eduard, and so Jozef uses theatrical formats to represent his work and research, believing that performance has the potential to shape the border between what is considered real and fictional?
The skin is an interface impenetrable to vision. The skin is a meeting point of the body and the outer world. On the skin, we can perceive both impulses coming from the outside and from the inside. At the surfaces of our bodies, both worlds meet. The further a point is from the skin, the fewer interactions are possible. The interface is a meeting point of the physical skin and the virtual space. Through the interface, embodiment leaks into the virtual space. As the body crosses the interface, its appearance changes. Deformations appear. The area behind the interface adapts in order to accommodate the body. The body serves as a reference. Without a body transgressing the interface, the space beyond is just a guess. Embodied transgressions of digital interfaces are being done in neuroscience research. Scientists studying the relations between the self and embodiment are staging illusions where subjects disown their biological bodies and shift their perceived embodiment into a virtual one. Focusing on the malleability of mental body representations, the research studies the ways in which they are conditioned by a vast variety of external stimuli. Such perspective offers an image of a body that is unstable. If we change perspective and take the body as the foundation of all other percepts, we come to different conclusions through the same procedures. Critical reenactments of the experiments address the overlooked questions concerning the role of meditation in the illusions. By rethinking the virtual body, virtual space is conceived of anew. The subject puts on the headset. Their physical body is hidden out of their sight. A new virtual body is spawned in the virtual space. The body is being touched repetitively. On their physical body, the subject feels the strokes they see on the virtual one. The feeling of ownership of the physical body is being disrupted. Their perceived embodiment is transformed into the virtual body. The space seen in the headset adapts to the body. First, the critical reenactments study the way in which the varying sizes of virtual bodies define the scale of the virtual space. The measurements suggest that the two are inversely proportional. The body being smaller, the space appears bigger. The body being larger, the space appears shrunken. The virtual space is defined by the way it is perceived. The distinction between the digital, defined by the code, and the virtual, pertaining to human perception, as theorized by Peter Wiebel, offers interesting context for the reflection. The space is coded in the same way independently from the size of the virtual body. The only variable is the body, yet it is the virtual space that seems to change. Second, the perceived embodiment is transferred into the body being invisible. As a result, the space seems to hide it in a fold, disrupting the Euclidean space. The sight cannot detect a body, but it can feel the touch. Embodiment shifts into the virtual body. A new spatial paradigm is generated. The new body both uses and is part of the interface. The virtual camera operated by the physical body renders a virtual one. The camera moves, but we rarely associate the movements with the body moving it. Perceiving the virtual space is an intervention. We do not see the space, we see the intervention. The presence of a body supersedes the space. The space is fractured into an array of features. Data is perceived and organized. A new space is being assembled. The body being located in a position differing from the viewpoint, the folded space gets bridged. The bridge connects any 2 points defined by the virtual body. The results show progress with every repetition of the experiment. Henri Bergson's idea of perceiving one's own body being a matter of gradual training, formulated in 1896, seems to be of growing importance in the context of the digital. The virtual is a spectrum. The body always plays a role in it.
I have a question. Did you create this presentation for us, or is this part of a bigger project?
Yeah, it is part of a bigger project, but this is a remix or like an edit I did for this conference.
How did you choose the aesthetics of this presentation?
I think like usually I speak about a wider context, and this time it was fully concentrated on the virtual body, so that kind of led the selection of the visuals I was using. And it's something that is like directly part of the research I'm doing. So it was not a material that would be made up only to be presented. But those are the very experiments and the way I make schemes of what I think I learned through the experiments.
Thank you for your presentations. I think it was I would be very interested seeing the whole project. I kind of felt that there's a lot of material that is very interesting. Thank you for being with us. Gonna have our next online presenter, Enrico DORIGATTI.
Hi.
Yes. Hey. So Enrico is a sound artist and creative technologist working across different formats. He is especially interested in the artistic exploration of indeterminism, audiovisual interaction, generative systems, and shared agency between humans and algorithms.
Hello, and welcome to this presentation. I'm Enrico DORIGATTI, a PhD student in the School of Creative Technologies at the University of Portsmouth, in the UK. This short presentation aims to introduce Live, a generative multimedia artwork released between 2017 and 2018. Live comes as a piece of software, therefore it is executable on a Windows machine, and at the same time it offers an implementation of cellular automata. As Live is a generative artwork, we will start by introducing this artistic scope. We will then move to explore cellular automata and their uses within the arts. The rest of the presentation will be dedicated to provide a comprehensive introduction to Live and its characteristics. Generative art is not a novel concept. To generalize, we can say that generative artworks are realized through processes and rules. A notable and quite old example is provided by the so-called Mozart-based game. This game allows the person playing to compose ever-varying musical compositions by rolling the dice. The game provides a set of musical measures, and the result of the dice determines which measure is going to be appended to the composition. Although very simple, this example provides the key elements of generative art: a process and a set of rules. Nowadays, generative artists leverage the computational power of modern machines, as they allow to employ complex processes and extended rule sets. In addition, as generative artworks are essentially algorithms, it is easy to see why information technology may be a powerful tool for the generative artist. Certainly, generative art is a branched and convoluted field, and it may be difficult to efficiently and effectively categorize artworks belonging to that scope. In this regard, Boden and Edmonds proposed a taxonomy based on the medium employed by the artwork, while Dorin et al. Proposed a taxonomy based on the entities, processes, interaction, and outcome of the artwork. Finally, generative art opens to some questions, which are highlighted by Galanter in the 9 problems of generative art. Rather than issues, these problems are more like philosophical open questions, which should be carefully considered by the generative artist as well as by the audience. One of these questions deals with authorship. Who is the author of a generative artwork? The artist or the generative system? Proposed by John von Neumann, cellular automata are computational models of simple and self-reproducing organisms organized in colonies. Cellular automata are used in a broad range of fields, and these simulations usually expose a few main characteristics. A core element of cellular automata simulations is the representation of living beings. These abstracted organisms are usually quite simple, lacking a lot of the features proper of living beings, and we can call these entities cells. These cells can have a finite number of states. For instance, they could be either alive or dead, so 1 or 0. A cellular automata simulation is also characterized by a virtual environment, a world in which the colony of cells may evolve and thrive, and really this is the space where the simulation takes place. There are 2 other core elements in cellular automata simulations. On the one hand, a set of rules determining the state of the cell and how and when a cell transitions from one state to the other. For instance, in the case of a binary simulation, so with cells either alive or dead, these rules determine when a cell dies. On the other hand, there is an initial disposition of the cells. For instance, when time equals 0, there is a rule, an algorithm, or a random disposition of the cells which determines the initial state of the colony. In other words, where the cells are placed within the virtual environment at the beginning of the simulation. The features listed may vary across different simulations and different implementations of cellular automata, and of course these characteristics may assume any arbitrary value, allowing to personalize and adapt the simulation to the specific needs. Possibly one of the most known and studied implementation of cellular automata is the game of life. This simulation was proposed by John Horace Conway, a mathematician, and is implemented as a 2-dimensional environment, therefore represented as a square, in which the population of virtual living beings, the colony of virtual cells, evolves according to 4 rules. These rules are reported in the table in this slide and determine whether a cell is alive or dead. If you search the game of life on Google search engine, you will land on a page running a simulation, and there is also a wiki on conwaylife.com/wiki where you can find a lot of useful information, a lot of facts about this specific cellular automata implementation and the studies behind its behavior. Indeed, what makes this specific implementation particularly interesting is the possibility it has to generate patterns known as clock, pulsar, blinker, glider gun. These are configuration of cells which repeat the same finite number of steps in a loop, resulting in stable structures. The game of life has also been extensively explored within the scope of interest for this presentation, therefore within the arts, and there are a number of instruments and tools based or inspired by this simulation developed by Conway. These tools make use of cellular automata to generate sequences, nodes, data, or in general to control parameters of digital artworks. The notions presented so far should have provided a comprehensive background for the understanding of life, a generative multimedia artwork based on cellular automata and inspired by the game of life. The most notable difference between the original game of life and life as generative artwork is the three-dimensional environment, which in life it is shaped as a cube-like solid, rather than a plane. The different environment made it necessary to introduce rules different from Conway's original ones, as well as new mechanisms and features aimed at making the growth and development of population of virtual cells sustainable on the long run. These are the features introduced alongside the rules governing the development and growth of the population of virtual cells. These features are strongly interconnected with the rules, and for instance, point 3 and 4 both deal with the capacity of a cell to produce new neighbors around it. Concerning the audiovisual output of life, it is directly connected to the state of the algorithm and therefore to the state of the population of the cells. Clearly, life is a generative artwork and not a faithful audio visualization of an algorithm, and therefore both the visuals and the sound are processed through filters and other effects, increasing their artistic value but blurring the connection to the algorithm. Concerning the visuals, the population of cells is represented by particle systems. The colors of the particles suggest the seniority of the different cells, although the palette employed varies over time. There are also camera movements happening and changing the perspective from which the particle system is considered. Concerning audio, the sound is produced through frequency modulation engines. The frequencies and the amplitudes are modulated through low-frequency oscillators. All the data concerning audio are taken by considering different portions of the three-dimensional environment, the matrix, on which the population of virtual cells develops and grows. Due to the length of this presentation, I will not be able to show you a demo of the artwork. However, you can find a short excerpt by following the QR code or the link provided. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and do not hesitate to get in touch. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. It is a shame that we did not get to see the work. I'm looking at it on my phone now. It is beautiful.
Thank you very much.
And
yeah, sorry.
I wanted to ask, why did you choose to kind of go for the aesthetic route instead of staying true to this original algorithm?
So that's primarily because it was originally an artistic project. So I decided to favor the aesthetic and the artistic side of the project rather than its precise audio visualization. As I said probably in the presentation, I decided to make it more artistic rather than scientific, let's say. And yeah, this is probably a big issue within the whole topic of artistic research, as one aspect, for instance, the computational aspect or the scientific aspect is difficult to balance it with the artistic side of one project.
But it does look very beautiful, and yeah, and I think I will try to read up on it a bit more. It's a bit hard to see on the phone. We will say thank you for being part of this conference, and we will go to our next presentation by CompMonks.
Hi everyone, good afternoon.
Hey. So I will quickly introduce the group. So CompMonks is a new media architect, educator, and researcher from France, currently based in Zurich. His artistic work follows a series of design objects and mixed media installations, shedding light on the power of combining the human mind with computers.
Would be relevant to talk about today. So I will briefly show you two series of works that gives a larger context to Stargazer first. And to stay short, I'm adding a QR code for each work that leads to a video with more detailed documentation if you like. So first, Proteus is an interactive and generative series started in 2018 in duo collaboration with Maija Smigielska. It evolves around a common material vector that is called ferrofluid, and which behavior may be modulated by magnetic forces. We transition this material throughout the series between analog and fully digitized surrogates. The series addresses digital and natural communication by embodying the mythology of the Greek god Proteus as a foretelling deity constantly shape-shifting to evade truth. Proteus 3 is an interactive and generative video installation which remains in conversation with its audience and learns from the visual attention it can get from pose and gaze estimation to produce new potentially meaningful sequences of images. This oval form recalls its historical significance in late Baroque to evade monocentric and radial designs, and relates to the organic sources of the visual imagery being displayed and projecting the far distant natural world into that exhibition space. Historically, this role was assumed by the presence of an oculus in a building. Here are one of the driving references we use, that is Palladius Pantheon in Rome. And Proteus 3.5 is a subsequent version of it. In that version, we then integrated a BCI to interact with the generated pattern and modulate them according to measured levels of engagement in real time. It is also a more introspective and meditative experience. As you enter, you implicitly find yourself in tune with the generative visuals, isolated from the rest of the world. We wanted to install this work as a volume, a section cut from another world or building and placed there in the exhibition space. It can be perceived as a form of portal with unreachable end. The outsides are sleek and black, and the insides are covered with reflective and rippled metal panels with a human-sized TV at the end. We thought that because of the introspective nature of this version, we should seek references in religious pilgrimage buildings and found in altars and chapels very similar designs. Here you see a reference to the Hermitage of El Rocío in Spain. Another work, Dreamcatcher, is a new series started last year on the materialization of dreams. The first iteration and research of the series was produced in 2023 for the Great Prize of Architecture, of Emerging Architecture, at the Beaux-Arts Academy in Paris. It is an immersive installation that investigates the relationship between writing and memory through the prisms of personal dreams, seeking to expose their content to the awakened experience. The work is exhibited as an interactive and generative installation within the open volume of a cube. Two walls and a floor are joined to form a corner screen of 3 meter sides that delineates itself from the surrounding space and blurs its internal limit. The inner surfaces serve as a continuous projection screen like a cyclorama, where the generated landscapes of the dreams are displayed and synchronized with a VR headset that visitors can wear and enter the installation to reenact a sensible exploration of the dreams. The project uses brain imaging data from personal sleep recordings during lucid dreaming sessions and their narrated recollections during waking periods in order to explore and experiment with the topics. I am now working on the next version of it for touring next year. So now Stargazer. And one of the key questions that animates my research is how can we possibly encode digitally something so subjective and sense-making? And at the same time, embracing the premise that such capacity is better left open, vague, fleeting, and graspable to remain powerful. In architecture, one of the foundational acts of transformation is to aggregate parts together to create something new that makes sense somehow. It is called architectonics, and historically, discourses about modeling and composition have all been about formalizing and systemizing this act into stable structures. So I call this series Stargazer as a reference to the foundational act to find oneself in the universe and trying to make sense of it all by linking the dots. The way Anaximander and Eratosthenes in ancient Greece gazed at the stars, and by doing so reshaped the world that surrounds the human, or the way gazing at the Halley Comet in the 17th century drove the birth of organized computation. It was for me a way to bind references of human sight, meaningfulness, and computation shared in the history of ideas, all together in one title. The Stargazer is a work on generated aggregates made of solid random parts, trying to explore the beauty of the problem, and yet the possibility to establish a communication pathway between human thought digitized and interpreted by machine learning models. This is a brief overview here of its first exhibited instance in the group show Neurons in 2020 at Centre Pompidou, Paris. Two aggregated sculptures made of about 400 different random separate parts and put together by the sheer thoughts of relating to the concept of a colon as an architectural element. The aggregates are scale models about 60 centimeters high and self-standing. The selected shapes and colors were brought in to brighten the organic and embodied nature of the work as it becomes more conceptual and abstract paradoxically. In the middle was a long-form video documentation of the research. In this work, the interactivity is more in the process of creation than the exhibited installation itself. It is more individual, introspective. And like the aggregates, its parts were also generated with the same technology using a custom BCI system that I developed over the years. These parts were not driven by any major intentions, but letting my mind wander into which configuration of these blobs would make sense. And so a part would be for whatever is the case. So the real starting point was to start the process of aggregation from something that do not make much sense in terms of architectonics and generate a myriad of senseless piles of parts, which only relation would be to not collide with each other and fall on the ground by gravity. Piles can make sense as single objects, of course, but not as aggregates of parts. They are just piles after all. These piles were given as a massive dataset to train machine learning models to generate more piles. But each time a new one would be produced, it was presented to me through the BCI system, and a neural response was interpreted to identify whether or not that pile would relate to the concept of a colon in my mind without further explanation. And as this is done interactively at fast pace, aggregates start to form in the duration and stabilize implicit references to the concept with geometric, topologic, and aesthetic characteristics that were not specified, such as verticality, twists, intuitive physics of stability. And after some time of conversing that way with computer, this fleeting concept of a colon from the individual mind of a human can be artificially learned and re-explored by automatically generating new ones. On the left, you see the aggregate of a colon from my own thoughts used as a training for the generator to produce a new one on the right. In the duo of intelligence, human and artificial, the human is a discriminator producing values, and AI is a generator producing tokens of them in an open-ended way, as a form of navigation amongst the flows of my thought. So this particular instance was obviously about a specific architectural element that is a colon. And I am now developing the series further to address larger and more spatial elements. So anyone interested in collaborating, in exhibiting or producing this next phase is more than welcome to get in touch. And I will conclude here, but the choice of the colon was also a means to reconnect with the sequential nature of this element and the way it also served in history to express a struggle between signification and formal structures. One of these first examples are the amazing Solomonic columns named after their Byzantine origins and the Temple of Solomon in late antiquity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was interested about your work at the Dreamcatcher. How much of the visual is just an aesthetic choice and how much was the actual dream?
So the starting point for this particular project was to use two different types of data sources. And the idea was to work with the struggle of trying to grasp a dream and try to visualize how intangible it can be and how volatile it can be. So to do that, I worked on trying to gather some data while I was sleeping and some data while I was awake, trying to remember it. So while I was sleeping, I was recording some neural data, so from the BCI, as I briefly showed it, where I was trying to decode sleep stages and their intensities. So you can actually find in which kind of level of sleep you are, deep sleep. You can find actually that if you are in some sort of remote eye movement stages, you are more likely to remember more details when you're awake. Seems like this. And once awake, so I try to train to progressively also try to write down, remember, re-narrate the previous night where I thought what I was dreaming about. So on one side, I had physiological data from my brain activity at night, and semantic written data from the next day. And I combine those two things, those two temporalities together to generate animated sequences, so small form videos, which were then mapped and projected on this diorama.
How long were you recording your dreams?
Well, this was through the whole night, and I was keeping only the chunk which was close to the phase of remote eye movement.
I meant that like it was one night or a week or a month?
No. So because this work was a preparation for the competition of emerging architecture, I did this training throughout the year, and this is something I kind of stopped for a bit because I got a daughter, and let's say sleep time are more restless than usual now. But as I am developing the new session now, I'm going towards training again, and this is obviously a work which is in the duration. So there is a data of these visuals which are being kept and archived over time, and this is going to become also a more interactive artwork, where if you actually step in this installation, where you look, where you are looking into the scenery of my dreams, you alter them as well as you would alter any memory if you start to try to explicit it or to formalize it. So those dreams are meant to evolve, to be keep being recorded over time, and also keep being altered as a long form series.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And this concludes our panel.